And away we go. There is too much beauty in this world to give up on it yet. And it is always too soon to surrender to cynicism. Bring your doubt, your skepticism, your downright confusion, even your bitterness. But in the midst of all these, in the center, wrap your tender fingers around that still bright thread of hope. Feel in your heart that still steady hunger for something more. The vision we glimpse every day in the rising sun across the foothills, the light that spreads across the face of the one we love, the look of knowing all there is to know and still loving life, loving us just as it is, just as we are. For this hour, we come to celebrate, to praise, to give thanks, to refuse to give up, and to steady ourselves. Keepers of hope, brave builders of this still possible world. Come, let us worship together. If We Just Talk of Thoughts and Prayers is our first hymn, written only in the last couple of weeks.
Of
join in the words of our unison affirmation? Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en el amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. And while you are standing, turn and greet someone you may not know.
Hi, Sarah. Great.
I don't know your name. Enough of that. Stop it, stop it, stop it. Enough. Enough, I tell you. I've lost control. As if I ever had it. Good morning. Do it again. Good morning. Good morning. Buenos dias. It is good to be together, whether you are here for the very first time or you have been here forever. If you want to stay in touch, you know what to do. There are blue connection cards in the pews. And there's enough going on in this service without going on and on and on with announcements. So let's get on with it. We've got an announcement about a religious education questionnaire. Craig and Andrew, come on up here and do it.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I am Craig Coldwell.
I'm Andrew Van Brock.
And we are members of the Religious Education Committee here at First Parish. And we have two announcements today, one about the RE questionnaire and another about the RE forum. The questionnaire has been a huge success so far. We want to send a big thank you to all 182 parishioners who have so far responded to our request. Go ahead, please.
We've heard from RE children, RE youth, RE parents, and RE teachers, of course, and from non-RE parishioners, lots of them. And folks, there is still time to complete a questionnaire. So you can fill one out by going to the common room after service or online. The deadline is tomorrow night, and we'd like to hear from everyone at First Parish.
So you may think that if you're not involved in the RE program, that you have nothing to offer, but that is so not true. We have a section of the questionnaire that's designed specifically for all parishioners. So we're really looking forward to all your responses to help with a vital, ongoing revisioning process for the RE program. And the questionnaire is a big part of that. It's easy, it's quick, and it's important.
And now for the second announcement, your answers from the questionnaire will be used to inform the topics that we address in the RE Forum, which is taking place in 2 weeks on Sunday, March 11th. Everyone is encouraged to attend the forum as well. And yes, your time and your insightfulness will be rewarded with snacks and refreshments.
So if you need a copy of the questionnaire or a link to the online survey, or you'd like to sign up for a seat at the RE Forum on March 11th, come by and see us during coffee hour. Look for the big question mark. We'll help to set you up. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you got out of bed this morning. You know, this morning would have been a really good time to have stayed in bed. But don't worry, you can sleep right here. Today is a perfect day for that, and as our time for all ages, I am actually going to read a book to you, and I'll give Lisa the book to take to the in-gathering so folks can see its pictures later. And the book is titled On a Magical Do-Nothing Day. Here we were again, me and Mom in the same cabin, the same forest, the same rain, Dad back in the city. Mom sat at her desk, quietly writing, while I destroyed Martians. She's on her phone. She's destroying Martians. She's playing a game, destroying Martians. Actually, I was just pressing the same button over and over again. I wished Dad were here. What about a break from your game, Mom growled. Is this going to be another day of doing nothing? She was right. There was nothing I wanted to do except destroy Martians. She took the game out of my hands and hid it, as usual. I found it, as usual, and went outside, where it felt like everything in our garden was hiding from the rain. I held my game tightly. Maybe it would protect me from this boring, wet place. I walked down the hill. At the bottom of our path, I saw some flat rocks in the pond. The rocks were round, like the heads of the Martians. I wanted to jump on them and crush them. Oh no! What did I do? My game fell into the pond. This could not be happening to me. I stuck my hand into the water to grab it. It was so icy cold, I screamed. Without my game, I had nothing to do. The rain felt like rocks were hitting me. I was a small tree trapped outside in a hurricane. Just then, there were 4 lights and 4 huge snails appeared. Is there anything to do around here? I asked the snails. Yes, indeed, they told me. I reached out and touched their antenna, as soft as jello. It made me smile. So I followed the snails down a path and found dozens of mushrooms. The air was so damp, I knew the smell from when I was small, my grandparents' basement. How many of you can remember the smell of your grandparents' basement? My cave of treasures. I felt a sense that there was something special close by, that I was surrounded. I bent down and dug my fingers into the mud where 1,000 seeds and pellets, kernels, grains, roots, and berries touched my fingers and hands, an underground world full of treasures that I could feel. I looked up at the sky. Sunbeams fell down through a giant strainer and blinded me. I thought I heard the beat of drums from far away, but that sound was my own heart. I felt filled up with energy and began running fast. So fast I fell down the hill. And there at the bottom, everything was turned upside down. The whole world seemed brand new, as it had been created right in front of me. I climbed a tree and looked out as far as my eyes could see. How many of you have ever climbed a tree? Good. I breathed in air until my lungs were bursting. I drank the raindrops like an animal would. How many of you have ever stuck your tongue out and tasted raindrops? I talked to a bird. How many of you talk to birds? I made my biggest splash, then I collected smooth stones as clear as glass and watched the world shining through them. Why hadn't I done these things before today? Soaked to my bones, I ran inside the house, took off my coat, and looked in the mirror. Oh, I thought I saw my dad smiling at me. How many of you have ever looked in the mirror and seen your mom or your dad? My mother was there, still writing, but now she looked different, like one of the creatures outside. "Oh, you're soaked. I'll dry you." She took a towel and brought me to the kitchen. I felt like giving her a big hug. I wanted to tell her what I had seen, felt, and tasted outside in the world, but I didn't. We just sat in the kitchen, looked at each other, and breathed in the delicious smell of our hot chocolate. That's it. That's all we did on this magical do-nothing day. Kids and teachers are going to go off to your in-gathering and classes, and we will sing Spirit of Life. If you don't know it, it's at number 123. We're going to read responsively. Connections are made slowly. It's at number 568 in our hymnal. You know, there is a lot of research being done these days on fast and slow thinking. And I suppose, in a way, when I preach in praise of boredom, I am preaching in praise of slowness. These are Marge Piercy's words. Connections are made slowly, sometimes they grow underground. You cannot tell always by looking what is happening. More than half a tree is spread out in the soil under your feet. Penetrate quietly as the earthworm that blows no trumpet. Fight persistently as the creeper that brings down the tree. Spread like the squash plant that overruns the garden. Gnaw in the dark and use the sun to make sugar. Weave real connections, create real nodes, build real houses. Live a life you can endure. Make love that is loving. Keep tangling and interweaving and taking more in. A thicket and bramble wilderness to the outside, but to us interconnected with rabbit runs and burrows and lairs. Live as if you like yourself, and it may happen. Reach out. Keep reaching out. Keep bringing in. This is how we are going to live for a long time, not always. For every gardener knows that after the digging, after the planting, after the long season of tending and growth, the harvest comes. Freely we have received. For the good work of this congregation within and far, far beyond these walls, our offering will now gratefully be received. Just a program note before my sermon. This sermon will conclude, just so you know, with 5 minutes, no more, no less, of silence. Now we return to our regularly scheduled broadcast. I hope that some of you have seen the most recent YouTube episode of Spiritually Speaking, the program produced by my friend and colleague Susan Abramson, rabbi of Burlington's Temple Shalom Ameth. Raise your hand if you have seen that episode. Many more of you need to see this. As an author and filmmaker, Susan is also known as Rabbi Rocket Power, the world's first female rabbi superhero. Black Panther is a breakthrough, but so is Rabbi Rocket Power, and I recommend them both. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Google Spiritually Speaking. This is a series of 30-minute videos about local faith communities. She's produced an episode about the Catholics, the Congregationalists, the Mormons, the Muslims, the Hindus, and most recently about us, Unitarian Universalists, and specifically us, the First Parish in Bedford. Watch the one about us. It is really quite well done, but the rule is that you must then watch another episode about another faith community. Susan's goal, Rabbi Rocket Power's intent, is to grow our interfaith awareness and literacy so we know the basics of these local faiths. Her next episode, by the way, will be about the Thai Buddhist community here in Bedford on North Road. Well, in all her episodes, Susan asks about religious holidays, among other things. And so she asked me, what are your Unitarian Universalist holidays? I explained that for the most part, we do not have uniquely UU holidays. We try to find meaning in the holidays of all faiths that are observed in our culture. Susan asked this same question of our junior youth group, and Gatalia Dogan West replied, "We recognize others' holidays, so, for example," she said, "we celebrate Christmas with a twist, or Easter with a twist." I kind of like that. Unitarian Universalists celebrate holidays with a twist. And so, in anticipation of this sermon, I looked at my multi-faith wall calendar, and I learned, for example, in Aboriginal culture, particularly in Canada, February is a storytelling month. For Buddhists, in February, there is Nirvana Day that remembers the death of the Buddha. Did you know that the Buddha died of food poisoning? He was given a gift of wild mushrooms, and that was that. Hindus in February honor the god Shiva, the cosmic dancer who creates, preserves, destroys, and recreates the world. In Shintoism this month, between winter and spring, there is Setsubium Sai, a happy family bean throwing festival. When beans are thrown into every room of the house and then through the outer doors with the shout, "Devil's out, fortune in." Devil's out, fortune in. Devil's out, fortune in. I think that one's got potential for us. At this time of the year, Wiccans recognize Imbolcs, hoping for fertility and successful farming in the coming year. And then, of course, for Christians, we are in the season of Lent, commemorating the 40 days that Jesus spent fasting in the desert. Lent began, on Ash Wednesday and ends on Easter. On Ash Wednesday, did some of you see people with ashes on their foreheads? It's always a bit startling for me, this visible recognition of one's mortality. And of course, it was made all the more startling by Ash Wednesday being the day of the Parkland murders. Christian clergy told me of the solemnity of imposing ashes on the foreheads of children, sometimes their own children, in their parishes. I also learned that in some churches, particularly those inclusive of the LGBTQ community, ashes can be mixed with glitter. Glitter ashes, a sign of our hope which does not despair, an inextricable element of queer history. I think that's got potential for us as well. That's Ash Wednesday with a twist. What I want to do with the remainder of this sermon is to reconsider the Christian season of Lent, Lent with a twist. Okay, first, a refresher. During the 40 days of Lent, in preparation for Easter, Christians engage in prayer, almsgiving, doing penance, which means showing sorrow for one's sins or wrongdoings, and mortifying the flesh. I had to look up mortifying. To mortify the flesh is to put to death, mortify one's sinful nature. And while this used to mean the wearing of sackcloth and ashes or even self-flagellation, which I don't particularly recommend, it more commonly means fasting or abstinence or the giving up of some luxury. In our more culture, which often does not know how to say no to anything, these are, I think, useful disciplines. There are also some Christians who interpret the Lenten fast in a positive tone, not as renunciation, but as contributing to causes such as environmental stewardship. Recently, I read in the New York Times that many Christians give up indulgences like tobacco, alcohol, or sweets, or transgressions like lying and swearing, but Anglicans this year are called upon to forswear synthetic fabrics, wet wipes, and those little boxes that hold dental floss. The Church of England this year has asked its people to forsake plastics, consumer products that are polluting oceans and rivers, fouling beaches, killing wildlife, and clogging landfills. That too is Lent with a twist. But let me tell you where my mind has wandered on this topic, particularly in this dispiriting era of seemingly endless wars, endless shootings, endless political cowardice, endless lies and calumny, endless outrage. You know, someone recently compared our public life to a whirling blender with its lid off, splattering every surface just horribly. Yes, there are occasions of hope, including the astonishing resistance of children and teenagers to a culture so bloodied by guns, resistance reminiscent of the children's campaigns that were a turning point in the civil rights movement. Nonetheless, in our public life, and for far too many of us in our private lives as well, we live in an era of sensory overload. My vision of Lent with a twist is that this be a season of resistance to sensory overload. Specifically, this Lent I speak in praise of boredom. Feel free again to tune out, let your mind wander, take a nap. That's what I'm here for. I am influenced by a new book titled Bored and Brilliant: How Spacing Out Can Unlock Your Most Productive and Creative Self by someone named Manoush Zomorodi. This is her thesis. I dived into trying to understand what happens when we constantly keep our brains busy and never give ourselves time to mentally meander. I spoke with neuroscientists and cognitive psychologists about mind wandering, what our brains do when we're doing nothing at all or not fully focused on a task. She continues, we may feel like we are doing very little when we endlessly fold laundry, but our brains are actually hard at work. When our minds wander, we activate something called the default mode, the mental place where we solve problems and generate our best ideas and engage in what's known as autobiographical planning, which is how we make sense of our world and our lives and set future goals. The default mode is also involved in how we try to understand and empathize with other people and make moral judgments. And she continues as well. When we let ourselves space out and our minds wander, we do our most original thinking and problem solving. Without distraction, your mind can go to some interesting and unexpected places. Creativity, no matter how you define or apply it, needs a push. And boredom, which allows new and different connections to form in our brain, is a most effective muse. It is what the futurist Rita King calls the tedium of creativity. The tedium of creativity. This author cites many experiments, such as asking a group of people to find as many uses as possible for 2 paper cups, preceded by 20 minutes of a meaningless task like copying numbers out of the phone book. They came up with mildly original ideas like plant pots and sandbox toys, but then the task was made more stultifyingly boring. This time they had to read numbers out of the phone book aloud for 20 minutes. And afterwards, they had more original ideas. Earrings, telephones, all kinds of musical instruments, as well, of course, as a Madonna-style bra. Here's her point. People who are bored think more creatively than those who aren't. When we're bored, we're searching for something to stimulate us so that we can't find in our immediate surroundings. Something we can't find in our immediate surroundings. Once you start daydreaming and allow your mind to wander, you start thinking beyond the conscious and into the subconscious. This process allows different connections to take place. It's really awesome. Totally awesome. Just like a magical do-nothing day. Lately, I have heard from educators in our congregation who tell me that so many of our kids' days are so totally over-programmed that when, by some fluke, they have a few minutes of spare time, they actually become anxious and totally clueless about what to do. They are unfamiliar with boredom. Nonetheless, on Facebook last week, our member Rebecca Green Neal reported a conversation with her 7-year-old son Jacob, who, after having had the flu for 4 days, complained, "Mom, I'm bored." To which Rebecca appropriately replied, "Yay! I'm glad you're feeling better." Of course, the Bored and Brilliant book has a lot to say about our digital overload and suggests ways to wean ourselves from our screens, but she's actually not anti-technology, and instead wants us to strengthen the muscle that enables us to say no to our devices, not to abstain, fast, flagellate, or mortify our phones, but to reestablish ways for us to be in control of them and not the other way around. She cites the example of a woodsy summer camp in Pennsylvania that, unlike other camps that ban phones and impose a digital blackout, this camp instead has an anything goes policy. Well, not exactly anything goes. No iPhones while canoeing is one rule, and during some other activities. But other than that, kids are allowed to keep their phones because the camp sees its mission as helping kids to learn how to make decisions, take considered actions, and set boundaries. We just figured if we are going to prepare them for life, part of that preparation has to be learning to find balance in their lives with technology and to help campers develop ways to cope with their devices. Board and Brilliant even has a 7-step plan of first self-observation, and then keeping your devices out of reach while in motion, like canoeing or walking. Taking a photo-free day. No pics of food or kittens or kids. Fourth, deleting an app or 2 or 3. And fifth, taking a fakecation, to be in the office but out of touch. And sixth, to observe something else, to notice things, just like the kid in the book noticed on the magical do-nothing day. And finally, to put it all together, to reclaim one's life and set new goals. My grandfather was a farmer who died when I was just 5 years old, but I grew up with many stories of his kindness and his sense of humor. His name was Irv Johnson. Irv was known for eating an entire pie in one sitting. And when my grandmother complained that he didn't even say whether he liked the pie that she'd made, he'd respond, "Well, I wouldn't have eaten it all if I hadn't liked it." And on my second birthday, he gave me this odd little book in which he had written some of his wit and wisdom. And it's really quite mind-wandering and rambling. Let's see if I can give you a flavor of it. He calls me Scoot, by the way. That was my nickname as a child, Scoot. And he wrote this on December 30th, 1954. This is 1954, and I remember that you are a good boy, and that Scoot is a good fellow. He goes on a bit here. I think you are a bum. And if you take it from there, 1955, won't be too tough. He goes on a bit here. He said, this may be the last book for 1954. Remember, he wrote it on December 30th, and will possibly become the bestseller as book of the month, or the one that should be read in every home. And then he says, when things get dull, you want to go to the toilet, and you don't have to. But you could prove your point. And then he says something about Mr. Snow and Claus said they were giving us a batch of snow, but I guess they ran out of mix. Yes, his wit and wisdom wanders a bit. But as for the part about the toilet, I think he was saying when the world and other people start getting to you too much, why don't you go to the bathroom and close the door and sit on the toilet and, well, do whatever you want and let your mind wander. That, my friends, is my advice for Lent. Lent with a twist. Except that I haven't yet told you my favorite knock-knock joke. Ready? Knock, knock. Who's there? What is this life? Our hymn is number 94. Devil's out, fortune in. Devil's out, fortune in. Devil's out, fortune in.